Because they told you?
Well, I mean, to some extent, you have to take that on trust, right?
Okay, and then, and I guess taxes on the money that they paid these employees. Did many of these 2,700 women continue to work at Morgan Stanley?
I think many of them did.
They did?
Yeah.
And would you say the atmosphere at Morgan Stanley today is a better working atmosphere for women today?
We certainly hope it is, and I think it is. I mean, I think whenever you're talking about changing the culture at a large company, it's a slow process. It doesn't happen overnight, so it happens in little baby steps, and I think we took some steps.
What are the important, significant changes that Morgan Stanley is supposed to implement as a result of this settlement?
Well, they have additional training that they're required to do. They have changed...
Training in what sense?
Training for their managers regarding discrimination issues in the workplace.
Yeah.
Training for the employees regarding how to make complaints, what the process is supposed to be like. They have a different way that they're supposed to distribute their equal employment opportunity policies. We tried to affect a way that they distribute accounts. We've had some input on how partnerships are formed between financial advisors. And I think some of the key issues in the Morgan Stanley case are the outside experts that we have overseeing the implementation of the settlement to make sure that they're complying with all the terms that they're to comply with.
Who are these outside experts?
Well, there's a couple of industrial psychologists, well-known industrial psychologists. And
who are they paid by?
Morgan Stanley.
Okay.
And there's a settlement monitor who is a lawyer.
Did they report to the court, or do they report to plaintiff's counsel, or who do they report to?
They're paid by the company, and they report to plaintiff's counsel.
So you get reports from these people. How often?
I'm not sure exactly how often the reports are. They're at least twice a year.
Yeah, as a result of this case, though, in settling this, and you were one of 3 law firms that settled, it's a major step forward. In fact, as I did my research, I think this was the 2nd class action that they settled, which is a gender class action case in the last, 6 years or something like that. Other female financial advisors have come forward in saying they're treated the same unfair way, right?
Yes.
That's good. Let's talk a little bit about class actions and discrimination. Who can file a discrimination case?
Well, any employee who feels like they've been discriminated against on the basis of sex, race, national origin, age, disability can file.
Before lawyers get involved, someone's at a company. A woman is at a company. She feels she's being discriminated against. What is her proper channel of filing a complaint?
It depends on the company, and we usually recommend that they try the internal processes.
Filing a complaint with whom?
Before filing a complaint with an outside agency like the EEOC or the state agency that handles discrimination and harassment types of claims, most large companies especially will have an internal process. It either involves going to the Human Resources Department or trying to work the issue up through the chain of management.
What do? They write a letter to Human Resources?
There's different ways depending on the company. Sometimes it's just a phone call. Sometimes there's a form they have to fill out. Sometimes it's a narrative, an email. Some places have a hotline or an anonymous ethics number that they can call. But most companies, I should say, the first step they want you to take is try to work it out with the supervisor. And in most cases, that's the person who's causing the problem.
People are human beings, right? You're going to the person who's causing you a problem.
Right.
And you're saying, I have a problem with you. Obviously, because they're a human being, they take offense at this.
Yes.
And they feel that, wait a minute, who are you to tell me how to do my job, right? So then another word pops up, which is called retaliation. A lot of people don't want to complain against their supervisor because they're going to be retaliated against.
It's true, unfortunately.
So what happens next? And can a company, by the way, people are terminated, aren't they?
They are.
But what happens, what is the safest bet for an employee that feels that they're being discriminated against? Like you see with these female financial advisors. What's the safest way and the most effective way? Just make everyone aware of the company, that you have a problem? Not just one person? Not your immediate supervisor?
That's a difficult question to answer, and it tends to depend on who the particular players are and the organization and how it's set itself up. In some organizations, I've seen that the best way to actually get the problem to stop is to talk maybe to the person who's engaging in that conduct. Again, depends very much on who that person is and whether or not they're going to be receptive and whether or not they are maybe doing things accidentally.
Yeah.
At a company and even in an industry like Wall Street, where you're dealing with decades of tradition, going to that branch manager, who's usually the person making the tough decisions, you're up against a brick wall. They're not going to change the way they're doing things because you bring it to their attention. Right.
What about time limits in filing a case of discrimination? What are the time limits involved?
Well, it's important to act as quickly as you can. You should not delay, but there are some legal time limits.
Well, I mean, take these cases of the Morgan Stanley financial advisors. I mean, this was an ongoing problem.
And when it's an ongoing problem, it makes it especially difficult. When do you complain? And I guess everybody has a different answer to that. They have to get to the point where it's bad enough they want to complain.
So are you saying that if you work there for 10 years, and you put up with it, you have no right to complain?
Well, you don't have, it's not that you don't have a right to complain, but there may be limits on how far back you can go once you do complain.
So in other words, to cover a period of time in case you win a lawsuit.
Right.
You mentioned the EEOC. What is that?
That's the federal agency that investigates and oversees enforcement of claims brought under Title VII, which is of the Civil Rights Act, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Okay. So there are very different forms of discrimination that they cover.
How does it operate?
Well, it's a large federal agency. It's got offices all over the country, in most major and in a lot of minor cities. And the way typically it operates is you'll either call them up, if you're not in a town where they have an office, and explain the situation, and they'll send you a charge form to fill out. Or if you happen to be where they have an office, you go in and fill out a charge form, which is a one-page document, provide additional documentation, and then they'll take that and they'll send it to the employer, which is always a sticking point because then the employer knows about it and can retaliate if they're of a mind to do that. But they investigate the charge.
When do you come to that point where you go to the EEOC? After you've failed in any effort to try to resolve your problem yourself as your own company, right?
Well, once the employee has tried the internal processes and either found that they were getting nowhere, it wasn't being taken seriously, or that retaliation has started, is usually the time that they go to the EEOC. And in most cases, you have 300 days to file your claim. It can be different in different states, but the majority of times, and in New Mexico, it's 300 days.
How is sex discrimination defined?
Well, sex discrimination is something where the employee is treated differently because of their sex. So, in other words, if not for the fact that she's a woman, she would not be treated in the same way.
So your legal strategy, as with all law firms, you were prepared to go to court, weren't you? You were prepared to take this to trial, right?
Yes.
Where would this have been tried, by the way?
The case was filed in the district in Washington, D.C. There was an agreement among the parties, including the defendant, that would be the jurisdiction in which it was filed. Would it actually have been tried there is a little uncertain.
In this particular case, when it finally came down, when did you know it was going to settle?
It looked like it was going to settle, I would say, towards the end of 2006. There were some discussions with the company that resulted in the settlement.
That must have been a happy day for you and your clients.
It was a happy day. We were pleased to be sort of at the end of the settlement discussion road.
Right.
There are a lot of processes that have to take place even after the settlement is reached, though. You have to go through the court and get it approved.
Right.
There are competing cases, perhaps, that the court has to address. Are they going to be rolled into this class, or are they going to be separate cases?
As a final note, let me just say that without lawyers like yourself who fight for the little guy would be trampled left and right? Do you see permanent changes in some of the industries with some of these programs that they're required, like Morgan Stanley, required to implement so that it's better for female financial advisors?
I think you see some changes. We negotiated some very specific changes, so those changes have been implemented. That doesn't change people's minds and the way they react to other people.
Right.
But over time, I think that can make a difference.
Have you seen that other investment houses change maybe their policies Because they follow these cases. They don't want to be sued next, right? Have you seen or evidence that they've made changes too, voluntarily?
I think we have, because we've undertaken some investigations within the industry. And sometimes when we start an investigation, the people that we talk to will say, you know, it used to be really bad, but it's gotten better. Or they perceive it as being better than it used to be.
Well, I want to thank both of you for spending some time with us today, and congratulations on that case. I hope you win your next case like that, and I hope everybody that's watching this show, if they have a discrimination case like this, to contact you, because you obviously have a record of success that can do them good. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at InsiderExclusive.com.